So welcome back to DecoyNoise, where today we're fulfilling a subscriber request from Tristan asking if we can cover r/NuclearRevenge. So today in Decoy Court, we're going to cover 3 stories from r/NuclearRevenge, read over the top comments and the controversial comments, then have you, the viewer, decide the final verdict in Decoy Court down below. So let's go over and shoot over to that first post, which is, man gets his car crushed by not paying his repair bill. OP writes, not my story, but my father's. Took place in the early 2000s. He's a master mechanic who can literally work on any car, foreign or domestic. He's teaching me right now, and it's an honor to learn from him. He's always run his own independent repair shop almost as long as I can remember. As he told me this story recently, it just seems perfect for this sub. So this guy comes in with a pretty nice Chrysler convertible to get his transmission fixed. He had to remove the transmission, disassemble, and rebuild it. Pretty long process, but it's no problem. After a day's work, he calls a customer up and says his car is ready. He reminds him of the agreed upon price of $1,200. The guy said he could only pay $600 then, and he'd have to get back to him for the rest. Now, this isn't out of the ordinary. Where we live, most people aren't exactly wealthy. And my dad's a nice guy. He single-handedly supported 4 kids and a wife, so we weren't exactly rich. It's not uncommon for people to pay in installments. He doesn't charge interest or fees or anything, just tries to do what's right. The guy pays half his bill, and with the promise of paying the remaining amount in a few weeks. He leaves with his car. About 2 months pass, however, and the guy hasn't paid, hasn't even contacted my dad about any issues or to say something like he lost his job or something. So my dad calls him up and asks when he thinks he'll be able to pay the rest of his bill. And I kid you not, this is how the conversation went. Dad, hey, this is placeholder name. I was wondering when you'd be able to pay the rest of your bill. The guy replies, oh yeah, about that. I'm not paying it. Dad, surprised. What? Is something wrong with the car? If something went wrong, I'll take care of it. And the guy replies, no. The car runs great. I'm just not going to pay you. Dad, what? Why? The guy says, well, I have the car now, so I don't see any reason to pay you. They went back and forth a bit before my dad realized it was pointless and decided to enact some sweet revenge. He calls up the local towing company and gives them the guy's address, license plate, and care description and tells them to tow the vehicle to the county recycling center. He then calls up the recycling center and says, hey, you're going to be getting a Chrysler convertible with license plate this number from my towing company. When it gets there, I want you guys to crush and recycle it. And so, they do. Car gets crushed and recycled. The next day, the guy shows up to my dad's business, furious with the state patrol. My dad explains the entire story, and the cops tell the guy that technically, the vehicle was moved, not stolen. The recycling center received recyclable goods, and it's not stolen property. And now the car no longer exists as it's been recycling, thus a criminal matter, not a civil one. Not a criminal matter, but a civil one. So the guy sues my dad, and once again, my dad explains the entire story, and amazingly, the judge says the same thing as the troopers and dismissed it. It sounds almost unbelievable because it seems so illegal, but if a judge rules in his favor, it's got to have some merit by technicality or something. Granted, this was maybe 15 years ago, so the laws could have changed since, but geez. The guy gets his car crushed simply because he chose not to pay the remaining car bill and wanted to take advantage of someone's kindness. So taking the case and rushing it over to Decoy Court, even though it's just nuclear revenge, is, as long as the courts decide with them, the Decoy Court can't preside over them. It's just a situation where they thought they were going to get away with something, and apparently someone that is an expert in their craft. They're an expert in the craft of repairing cars and also the legality of what happens when you sign a car over to somebody and don't pay the bill. Obviously, if the judge and the police had ruled in his favor, he's okay. Is it an antagonist move of someone that can't pay their bill to just destroy their car? Maybe, but if he was just that pompous about it, I'm gonna go ahead and say not the antagonist. The only thing is with the Decoy defense of the inverse of that would be just a situation where they weren't that pompous about it. They're like, well, I had the car. I really don't have the money for you. If I could, I would, but I really can't. They're really struggling even more than OP's dad, so I could see that, but still not the antagonist. Decoy Court will take a brief recess. I want to know what you guys are thinking about story number 1 with getting your car destroyed because you owe $600 on it. A nice Chrysler convertible at that. So let's go over and shoot over to those top comments right now, which is from somebody saying, who's a mod who sticky their own comment saying, reminds me of the time when I was a kid and my little bro got mad at me, so he took my Lego car, ran outside and chucked it out at our car and said it was an accident. Okay, now on a serious note, the only thing that is questionable about this story would be the legalities mentioned in the story. Not sure if OP could really get away with doing that, but a cool story nonetheless. P.S. I made up that Lego story. Okay, so he's just adding fuel to the fire? I don't know. So OP, the next poster says, yes, your dad has full right to do so. It's called mechanic's lien. Anytime a car is left with unpaid work at a mechanic, the mechanic can sell the car to recoup losses. This is here in the US. The guy had a written contract. That's why I worked in your dad's favor. So I'm glad somebody that is allegedly an expert in the field can shed light as to why this would be a real story, even though the mod sticky their old comments saying that it wasn't the reality. The next reply would be, oh, so there's a typo about uses from Suze. Okay, that's cool. The next reply is, I wonder what dork who refused to pay had to do to go places now that his car is obliterated. And someone saying there's no way that this is a true story. So, I mean, I'm not a big fan of the whole just shouting down stories. They're fun stories or reading them. Let's just go ahead and say, even if you have an outlandish story, we're not going to call it fake because it does us no good. And these are just people that are in a bad mood. So let's go ahead and shoot over to that second story from NuclearRevenge, which is a newly hired youth minister got me kicked out of church for no reason. I found out that he was with the deacon's wife, and I helped the deacon ruin his life. So obviously, I make these very PG-13 stories. So OP writes, I posted this on r/ProRevenge and lots of people liked it with 15,000 upvotes. So I thought I'd share it with you guys. Enjoy. So I'm not going to read the too long didn't read because we're going to read the entire story. So OP says, about 6 to 7 years ago, I was in a ministerial student at a conservative Christian college. I had attended the same Bible-believing church since I was a small child. It was large, about 1,000 members, but not a megachurch. This church was an enormous part of my life for as long as I could remember. I played piano for the youth choir, preached at the children's church service, which was held in the church's chapel at the same time as the adult service, drove the church bus to pick up unchurched children, etc. ad infinitum. I did all of this for free, not even getting reimbursed for expenses. During my senior year in college, we got a new minister of music, education, and youth. This guy was as charming as an ice cream sundae with razor blades in it. I'll call him Mr. Charming. All the deacons and their wives thought he walked on water. He was an authoritarian jerk. In his first meeting with the church youth group, he announced that he had been hired to straighten out the youth group. One of his favorite sayings was, when I tell my disciples jump, the only question they should ask is how high and how far. The adults loved him and the youth hated him. Within a few weeks, half of the high school and college students, i.e. all those without parents in the church, had quit coming to the church. Most of the youth directors would have gotten in trouble over this, but he had the audacity to proclaim in front of the entire congregation in the Sunday morning worship service that he had eliminated all the thorny ground from the youth group, a reference to the parable of sower in the Bible, and the pastor of all the deacons loved him for it. He didn't waste any time going after what he really wanted, the pastor's job. The pastor, who all call him Pastor T, was about 60 years old. Within a few weeks of Mr. Charming's arrival, rumors started circulating about Pastor T's health. He was an avid runner and cyclist, and that he just didn't seem to be as mentally sharp as he used to be. He frequently quoted long Bible passages from the pulpit, entirely from memory without misstating a single word, and sometimes in Greek or Hebrew. Worst of all, however, was the accusation that Pastor T was really too liberal for the church. In my denomination, it's a kiss of death to even be suspecting of being a liberal. None of these accusations made any sense, but people kept talking about them. I have no idea why Pastor T didn't find out, or maybe he did find out and was just too scared to do anything about it. In some denominations, like the Catholic or Methodist, the denomination assigns pastor/priest, not my church's denomination. Each church calls a minister. This guarantees every pastor always walks on a razor's edge. The slightest slip and you're out. You don't even have to slip. Maybe you do the right thing and it still offends enough people. It doesn't take many, just a handful if they hate you enough. Then you're out. Or maybe, like Pastor T, some creep just lies about you and gets her job. And since the church often owns the house, the parsonage, or manse, your entire family is suddenly homeless and destitute. Then I became a target. I still don't know why. A couple of months after starting to work for my church, Mr. Charming called me and informed me that my services were no longer needed at the youth choir, children's church, bus ministry, anywhere. In fact, he said he didn't even want me to participate in any of those functions at all, not even go to the Sunday morning worship service. I later found out that members of his family had been hired by the church at very nice rates of pay to perform these functions that I had been doing for free. His wife got paid more for playing a beat-up piano at a 1-hour youth choir rehearsal than the main organist/pianist got paid for playing the adult choir rehearsal, plus Sunday mornings and Sunday evenings, when the youth choir sang. The wife could barely pick out the notes on a piano. This lady radiated bitterness, resentment, and repressed anger. But she rarely said anything. She just sat there and glared, which was somehow even creepier than when she spoke. I was very hurt, emotionally so. I dropped by Pastor T's office and tearfully asked him what I'd done wrong. I couldn't get a straight answer other than he told me that people are saying things about me and that if I wanted to get a good recommendation from him to our denomination's minister school, I'd better shut up and do what you're told. So I started asking what all my church friends and people were saying about me. Everyone, Everyone said, well, I didn't want to tell you, and I don't believe it, but here's what I heard. According to the rumor mill, I had gotten my girlfriend pregnant and forced her to get rid of it. I hadn't even had a girlfriend since junior high, and I'd been arrested for possessions of drugs, and my dad had to pay a bunch of money to hush it up. I didn't even know what pot looked like. There were other rumors, but you get the idea. I did what Pastor T told me to. I never darkened the door of the church again, except once, months later, see below, and it hurt like heck. I devoted my life to that church since I was a little kid, but I had to have the Pastor T's recommendation to get the minister's school I wanted to go to, and the pain was unbearable just driving by there, so I decided to keep my distance. But I started thinking about Mr. Charming. Anyone who was that evil had to have a past, and it probably wasn't a good one. I knew that. Just before working for my church, he had a large church in the same denomination in a small town about 50 miles away. The church was actually about twice the size of my church. So he had moved from a big church to the same job at a smaller church. A bad career move? Running away from something? There was something rotten in Denmark, and it smelled like an opportunity for me. As luck would have it, one of my uncles and his family lived in that same small town, although none of my family attended Mr. Charming's former church. So I called one of my cousins, told her my story, and enlisted her as a co-conspirator. I'll call her Anne. Then next Sunday morning, Anne and I attended Sunday school and morning worship at Mr. Charming's old church. Although Anne had never been a member of that church, it was a small town where everyone knew everyone. So she knew most of the people there. She started asking about Mr. Charming and got an earful. Our investigation went on for several weeks. I kept a low profile so as not to arouse a suspicion. Mostly I just stood around, ate donuts, drank coffee, and talked about football. Anne did most of the work because she knew so many of the people, and it was perfectly natural for her to attend the church in her hometown, even if it wasn't the church she usually attended. After the church was over, we would go to her house, have a delicious Sunday lunch cooked by my aunt, then write down everything we had learned. By then, Anne's whole family were there on my investigation. They were just as angry as I was about the way I was treated, and our weekly report made interesting lunchtime conversation. Within a few weeks, I was sure that I knew all I had to and drive away all I had to do was drive away a few of these young ladies and their parents, friends of my aunt and uncle, down to my old church and let them know the stories to the parents of a few girls in the youth group, and Mr. Charming would be Mr. Unemployed. But it kept on getting better and better, so Anne and I kept digging, and I really wanted to keep a low profile as I could because I didn't want to piss off Pastor T any more than I had to. He knew a lot of people in the denomination, and he would easily ruin my ministerial career before it even started. Finally, after about a month or so, Anne grabbed me by the sleeve and says, "You got to hear about this." She introduced me to a well-dressed, very large guy, maybe 30 to 35 years old. I'll call him Fred. We slipped off into a Sunday school room where we would not be overheard. It turned out Mr. Charming had a multi-year affair with Mr. Fred's wife. Fred had kept us cool when he found out, talked to a lawyer, had spent months gathering evidence, text messaging, voicemails, emails, even photos with Mr. Fred's wife and Mr. Charming in them. Apparently, Mr. Charming got stimulated by watching videos of himself doing wild things with Fred's wife. Then Mr. Charming would send the videos to Fred's wife, and they would both enjoy seeing that stuff while texting each other. Later, they would hook up the old-fashioned way and make more videos. Finally, Fred confronted his wife. She denied everything, but the evidence was just too much. Fred told her he wanted a divorce, full custody of the kids, their house, his retirement money, his business, her engagement and wedding rings, everything, even the dog. She hired a lawyer, but the law and courts being what they are in the rural Bible Belt county, her lawyer told her that if the judge saw the videos, she'd be lucky if she ended up in a homeless shelter with all her worldly possessions under her bunk in a garbage sack. Then Fred turned his attention to Mr. Charming. Fred still sincerely loved his wife, and then he was convinced that Mr. Charming had deliberately ruined his marriage, taking Mr. Charming to court, suing him for loss of consortium, and otherwise making him literally miserable and would take too long. This is the rural Deep South. Many people around here prefer a more direct approach. In rural counties, the police and a jury of your peers will probably include people you've known since kindergarten. So if you have good reasons for your actions and you aren't too stupid about it, there are things that you can do. Fred scheduled an appointment with Mr. Charming in his church office, who did not suspect a thing because Fred was a deacon and his children were in the church youth group. Remember what I said about Fred being big, 6'6", at least 300 pounds, and if there was an inch of fat on him, he hit it well. Looked like he could put up a 100-foot oak tree by the roots without breaking a sweat. Fred told me that he brought several friends with him, and of course, the videos. One friend blocked the door, another unplugged the phone, and a third one stood behind Mr. Charming and encouraged him to stay seated in his chair. Fred made Mr. Charming watch 10 minutes of the videos and calmly said, I'm going to stand here and watch you pack up your stuff. Then you're going to walk out of this building and never show your butt in this town again, or we'll be back. Mr. Charming did what he was told. A month later, he had a new job at another church, my old church, and started running another whole set of lives, including mine. Ruining a whole set of lives, including mine. Fred actually did not know where Mr. Charming had gone. He had been led to believe that Mr. Charming moved out of state. He was surprised, gratified, and angered to learn that this scumbag was only 50 miles away. This had all happened a few months before. Fred was still deeply in love with his wife. They were getting counseling and he hoped that they could save his marriage. But his hatred of Mr. Charming was still fulminating and had gotten reignited by me telling that Mr. Charming was living and working less than an hour away from his wife, like Mount St. Helens a few minutes before the explosion. He presented such a face of restrained rage and vindictiveness that it scared me, and I wasn't even the one he was mad at. The next day, Monday, I drove back up there and gave him a copy of the directory of my own church. It had home addresses, phone numbers, and email addresses for pretty much every member of the church. I showed him the pages and listed all the deacons and other church leaders, and I marked some of the church major financial donors. I explained my situation to Pastor T and asked that my name not be mentioned. No problem, he said. The next Sunday, I couldn't resist visiting my old church to see how things were going. Mr. Charming was nowhere to be seen, nor was any explanation given as to what happened to him. One weird thing though, Pastor T looked scared crapless. His voice, usually resonant, loud and almost musically baritone, trembled during the whole sermon. I slipped in just before the service started and I made a point of sitting the very front row, center pew. The look on his face when he saw me was worth all of my trouble. I didn't know it at the time, but Fred had gotten right to work and done a very thorough job. The whole church had gotten multiple anonymous emails with photos and videos of Mr. Charming and Fred's wife in various, compromising positions and states of undress. Deacons and major donors have got emails plus express mail packages just for good measure. Mr. Charming and Pastor T had been left out. They didn't know anything until the phone calls started pouring in. After the worship service, it did not take long for my church friends to figure out why I was there. It was very gratifying. I was something of a hero, although I kept swearing that I had no idea what they were talking about. Things continued to blow up at my former church for months afterwards. Both Pastor T and the pastor of Charming's old church almost lost their jobs because they had lied to my old church's committee of deacons who recommended hiring Mr. Charming about why Mr. Charming had left his old job, but somehow they managed to stay in the pulpits of their churches, although a lot of church members left my former church, which caused some financial problems. There was talk of legal action for sending unsolicited videos to old ladies and other people in the church, but no one ever was able to prove that Fred did it. I don't think they tried very hard after all. His wife was in the videos and photos. Both churches did not want this to become a court case because Mr. Charming's trysts, but in the fact that he spent years screwing the deacon's wife while he had unlimited, unsupervised access to dozens of church youth would then become a matter of public record, so they hushed it up. I never saw Pastor T again. I had lost all the love, trust, and respect I had for him, and I was sure that he had figured out that I was somehow connected to the whole fiasco, so my chances of preaching in a preaching career in my denomination were precisely zero. At that time, being a pastor like a Pastor T was the last thing I wanted anyway. I withdrew my application to the minister's school, and eventually completing a doctorate in archaeology at a different grad school, graduated with honors, and at large, widely respected state university. I've been teaching at a large public university in the Midwest of the USA with the summer gigs and archaeological digs in Europe, except the summer because of the lockdown. I am very happy. I had no idea what happened to Mr. Charming after he left my former church, but it didn't matter because I'd moved on to a new, happier, more meaningful, and enlightened life. On one last very gratifying event, the reason for this post. All of that happened 6 to 7 years ago. Fast forward to last March. I went up to pick up a friend at a large downtown urban bus station in the US. Everyone hates this place. Not only is it crowded, it is poorly maintained and filthy. It smells like spoiled garbage mixed with diesel exhaust and seldom cleaned public restrooms. My friend's bus was late. I stopped by the newsstand to get myself a soda and a candy bar. Who do you think was restocking the shelves? Mr. Charming. I just sat across from the newsstand and enjoyed my drink and snack. He recognized me and turned away. I just sat and watched him, restocking the shelves full of dirty magazines and junk food. Revenge is a feast that is best enjoyed cold. So taking the case to nowhere. I'm not doing Decoy to court on that. That story was insanely large, but I guess it did have a good payoff. I guess I should scout these stories a little bit more, but that was good. I mean, that had a lot of words in there. So let's go ahead and shoot to the third and final story from ProRevenge instead of NuclearRevenge, which is make me look bad on the job? Well, we'll see about that. OP writes, I worked at a clothing store in a mall for a year and a half, and it was not fun. But I think back to my time there recently, and I forgot this golden gem of ProRevenge. So a new girl had just been hired, as many people did in that job, and right away you could tell she thought she was hot crap. She's talking and acting like a manager. talking how many hours she had, and the worst of all, she wouldn't shut up about all the dudes she was with and how the money she got from them was the most important part. To put it lightly, she was a cold-hearted jerk who made everyone feel bad about their insignificant lives, as she put it. Here's where things go down. In our store, all the racks were milled steel bars and hooks so really hard to break and really expensive. They could, however, be bent out of shape if enough heavy coats stay on them for long periods of time. Miss Hotcrap here thought it would be a good idea to impress the management by putting all the coats on the same rack using the milled steel bars instead of circular racks that wouldn't wrap. I protested, of course, as I had been there longer and she said, I get paid more than you, so you do what I say. She got hired as a key holder of our gate, so she made $1 more than I did per hour. I go along with it and put the heavy winter coats up on milled steel and go about my life. Well, 2 weeks later, the milled steel is of course warped, and when management saw this, they flipped. Cheapo store, any cost was bad to them. Anyways, she blames it on me and I get written up for it. Now I refuse to sign, so they gave me less hours, which also cut my pay. Because she lied, I was now making 50% less than before and had a formal written complaint against me. To say I was ticked off wouldn't even start, so I devised a plan to get back at her. You see, the drywall and the center pillars had sustained water damage for early melt that year, making them extremely soft. However, they did provide some of the largest coverage of shelf space in the entire store, meaning basically a good 20% of shelf space couldn't be used. Now, the kicker is, Miss Hotcrap didn't know about this as she came in for a week after it happened, and then to the naked eye, you would think the pillar could be used as there were banners on it to hide the yellowing. I may have suggested what a waste of not being able to hide product on the pillars and how someone could come up with a nice display would bring a lot of customers due to how people could see it from the mall main floor. We were just off the food court. Her eyes lit up. Now here's the thing, I was taking a small break to a nice snowy lake cabin the next day, and the people had been working with her where the manager and the temps were not allowed to handle marketing and logistics, EI, putting shelves, rack up on the wall due to their costs and the incident that got me wrote up. Now I knew she wouldn't want the managers to see it because she wanted all the glory from it. She wanted to show to our 3 stores in the mall that her store was the best while the managers weren't around. So she, being with a temp and not being able to put up the shelving, put the heavy winter clothing on a milled steel rack attached to the soft drywall pillars. Within a week, the drywall pillars had collapsed and ruined $500 worth of product. Now, she tried to shift the blame on me, but I was away for the whole week, so it could not have been me because obviously that can't happen if I'm not in the forest hundreds of miles away from civilization. So no dice there, and she promptly charged with the repair, demoted the sales associate, and written up for what they finally realized was not just this, but the one they wanted me to sign. The repair was $2,500 plus $500 stock that get destroyed when 40 pounds of drywall came crushing down on it. But I wasn't done yet. You see, our manager in our store specifically was pretty chill, and she's still a professional friend to me. She had a group chat so we could talk off hours and keep up to date. Now, as I mentioned before, she wouldn't shut up about all the men she was playing and how the only thing that would matter was the money. And boy, oh boy, did she use the group chat to say a lot of this. Sometimes these dudes would come around and take her to lunch. Let's just say she was back for a little while finishing something up that I could see the text channel if they promised not to let her know that I told them. So they'd often go to their lunch date, and after 1 to 2 days, she'd be down a man. Finally, this boiled over when one of them took her phone to saw how many guys she had been with for money and messaged all of them about how much of a lying cheat she was. After about 2 months of her fountain of man money dried up and she got demoted to sales associate, she didn't have the money to spend on all her lavish nights out or designer clothing. She eventually moved up to another store for more hours and stole money from the till, causing her to get fired. A fitting end to a backstabbing ice queen, I think. I eventually left that job after half a year later to pursue my current job. Too long didn't read. A crappy coworker blames me for a task she commanded to do so I set her up to fail. Cost her $3,000, ruined her relationships she's having with 10 different men. She then steals from the company and gets fired. To clear things up, to those saying that charging an employee for repairs is illegal 100%, however, she decided to instead take a pay cut until it was paid back and keep her job rather than be fired. Minimum wage here is $15 an hour, so she took a cut down to approximately $12 to pay it back. Although this company is super sketchy and will do anything not to pay for their mistakes, even going so far as to leave a hole in the roof, water damage there for 10 months before fixing it, so during spring nothing could be put there. So taking the case over to Decoy court, I mean, a lot of this stuff, depending on what country it is, I don't think you're allowed to make them pay back the damages that are made during like business hours and they were told to do it. I mean, I'm kind of new to ProRevenge, Petty Revenge, so I don't really know what's going on over here oftentimes. I'll go ahead and just check over a couple of these top comments. There's a lot of stuff. So The top comment is, did they ever give you back your money or apologize once they realized the incident was her fault? They said, nope, that place sucked. My manager did mind you, but it was unofficial. Okay, so they made it right for her. And another one, like for any true narcissist, you just gotta give them enough rope, step away, and watch. Beautiful. And it is true, most of these people are self-saboteurs. Eventually it's gonna catch up to them. You just gotta let them do it. You can't be there trying to like help them. Hey, don't put the coats on that bar. Hey, don't do stuff with that drywall. Hey, don't talk to that many men. It's gonna come back to bite them. So I mean, this was a request for Tristan. Thanks for the request. We covered a subreddit that I've never even seen before, and obviously I probably should have scattered a bit more with the different stories, but I mean, if you like what I'm doing over here, you like the idea that I'm just covering different Reddit posts that you don't often see, make sure you subscribe down below, turn on the notifications, and if you like the video, push that like button, share this video, share the channel overall, but if nothing else, just go ahead and put this on autoplay and watch the next episode of DecoyNoise coming up next.